All right, we're live. What's up, Instagram? Good evening, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another episode of the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Minturn. Tonight, we're going to be talking about deadlifts. That's been the theme for this week, so we're just going to continue that theme with the podcast here. There's quite a few different pieces I want to touch on with the deadlift, so it might be a little lengthy tonight, but before we get started, tomorrow, it's Spicy Saturday, so I want to highlight that workout. It shouldn't be too bad, and then I want to go over some changes with my coaching offer that are coming up here in the new year. So with the Spicy Saturday workout, it's going to be an EMOM, except for it's going to be a 4-minute EMOM. So every 4 minutes, you're going to be cycling through these exercises. So it's a 16 alternating kettlebell snatches, 16 kettlebell swings, 16 goblet hold reverse lunges. So you're going to fly through all 3 of those exercises, and whatever time you have left within those 4 minutes, that's your rest time. So you're going to get through 5 rounds of this no matter what. So if you choose to fly through it, you're going to have more rest time. If you're one that needs to pace yourself, you're going to have a little bit shorter rest time. But there's a lot of hip hinging here with the snatches and with the swings, and then you're going to get a little squatting motion with the reverse lunges. The weight for that, for the RX, is going to be 53 for the men and 35 for the ladies. And then for the scaled movements, you're going to be doing, instead of the kettlebell snatches, you guys can do kettlebell cleans. The weights for that are going to be 35 for the men and then 16 for the ladies. When you guys do this workout, make sure you tag us. We're going to be doing some benchmark workouts starting next year. So that first benchmark workout will be posted the first Saturday of January, but you guys, with the benchmarks, you guys can test yourself every few months just to see where you're at with your fitness. One thing I wanted to highlight with the program and with the coaching offer, I will be changing things up a little bit. I've revamped it again. One of the major changes is going to be reverse classroom style. So all the information will be on a platform. You guys will have access to that platform, so folks who are very familiar with fitness can probably fly through it a little bit quicker than those who are not familiar with fitness. Those who are not familiar with fitness, it will be laid out very simply, easy to digest. With that, let's talk about deadlifts. First thing I want to touch on is your spine. So a lot of times I heard it today in the clinic that someone's got a bad back, and more often than not, your back is not bad, your spine is not bad. It's not genetic. It was not passed down from your parents or from your grandparents. The majority of folks that do have bad backs are, it's generally more of a load tolerance than anything. And I'll use a bridge analogy. Our tissues in our body are like bridges. Bridges are meant for a certain load. If you exceed that load, the bridge is going to break, right? You get too many loaded semis on a bridge, the bridge is going to break. The construction crew is going to come in, it's going to rebuild the bridge, or they're going to rebuild the bridge, and then they're likely going to reinforce the bridge, and then you're going to be able to drive on the bridge again, no problem. Same thing with your backs, same thing with any body part. If you exceed the load tolerance of that tissue, you have to get in there and build up that load tolerance, rebuild it, and then make it stronger. The deadlift is excellent at doing that for someone's spine. Again, you're going to hear that from some PTs that it's not. You're going to hear that from some chiropractors and some MDs that it's not. I talk about this on my newsletter this month. How there is a doctor out there that says you can either deadlift or you can either walk when you're 70, but you can't do both. So I disagree with that, but that's more in the newsletter too. But your spine is strong. It's able to handle the load that's applied to it as long as there's a progressive overload with the deadlift. So directly loading the spine is not bad to do. If someone's got a bad back or someone's having a painful back or an irritable back, what is the difference? Ask yourself, what is the difference between that and having like a sore shoulder, right? If you have a sore shoulder, when you go to therapy, you're going to load it with rotator cuff exercises, with shoulder girdle exercises, with some bicep curls, with rows, lat pull downs. You're going to be loading it. So why would we not do the same thing for your spine? Again, the deadlift is great at loading the low back. You need to do it properly, and I'll touch on some technique tips here too, but we do it for everything else. So you need to not avoid loading your low back just because it hurts. That's the exact reason why you should be loading your back. Let's see. Technique-wise, shoulders above hips, hips above knees. So Deadlifts are not, they're not a squat. If you're squatting your deadlift, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. You've got to make sure that it is truly a hip hinging motion. The bar needs to be at your shins. Your shins need to be relatively vertical before you go to pull. If you're a little too far forward, that can create a little excessive strain on your low back, and that's going to possibly cause an issue, which may be why some people don't really like doing deadlifts. But like I said, shoulders above your hips, hips above your knees. It's not a squat, it's definitely a hinge. So when you go to pull, you're pushing through your heels and you're going to stand up tall. As far as the dosing variations, so it's okay to lift heavy, it's okay to lift light, it is okay to wear a weight belt. All of those things are okay to do. It all depends on what your goals are, but also if you're dealing with a bad back, it depends on what your load tolerance is. Oftentimes in the clinic, we're starting people off in a very light load, maybe 15 to 30 reps, somewhere in that rep range. Now, they need to be fatigued with that. Like, just because you go light on the reps or you do more reps with light weight does not mean that you get to patty cake it and not necessarily be fatigued when you hit that rep range goal. You should be fatigued by 20 reps. You should want to put that weight down after 20 reps. Now, if you go heavy, that weight needs to look very different. You need to be fatigued when you put that weight down at 5 or 6 reps. You're not going to get the same stimulus if you choose a weight that you can do like you intend to do it 6 times, but then when you do the last set and you can crank out 15 of those, it's not going to be the same thing. You're not going to get that heavy lifting stimulus that you would necessarily get if you truly were lifting heavy. So you have to be fatigued at whatever rep range you decide to do. You have to be fatigued when you're done there. As far as weight belts go, so weight belts, and I did a specific podcast on this, but you see a lot of heavy lifting with weight belts, and people think it's to protect their spine when in fact it is the exact opposite. Weight belts, what they do is they increase the intra-abdominal pressure. So if you're dealing with a bad back, putting a weight belt on is doing the exact opposite of what you want it to do. You're going to be loading the spine with more weight because you can, but it's also going to be creating more pressure on the spine. So again, it's loading it in another fashion more than what you would be if you weren't wearing the belt. If the belt takes your pain away, it's not because the belt itself is adding more stability. It's because the intra-abdominal pressure that the belt creates is adding more stability. So dial it back. What could you be doing to increase the spine stability before you go lift the weight? Is it a technique flaw? Is it you're doing too much weight and you didn't leave your pride at the door when you walked in the weight room? Or is it something where you need to be doing a few glute exercises or some side planking and front planking and stuff like that to increase the stability at the spine first before you go to lift heavy with the deadlift? The weight belt, if the weight belt takes your symptoms away, there is something else going on that needs to be addressed before you go to lift heavy again. Lifting heavy weight without the belt, I have a power lifter on my caseload right now here in the clinic, and she whenever she's a high school power lifter, so whenever they go to lift heavy, like reps of 5 or less, the coach has them put on the weight belt. It's an automatic thing, and I don't get it because it's okay to use, but you need to also lift heavy without the weight belt. The stimulus is very different. The weight that you're going to be moving is very different. So you need to not rely on the weight belt to only lift heavy. You have to get used to lifting heavy without the weight belt, because if you're at work or if you're packing out a moose quarter or an elk quarter, or you're having to lift a deer up into the bed of the truck, it's not just for western hunters, it's for whitetail hunters too. If you're having to lift a deer up into the bed of the truck, you're not going to put on your damn weight belt before you go do that. Like, you're just not going to pack in your weight belt to the back country. You're not going to bring it out west with you. You're not going to bring it in the bed of your truck and have it waiting for you when you got to lift that deer in the bed of the truck. That's just not something that's going to happen. So you have to be able to lift heavy weights without relying on the weight belt in order to do so. And then movement variations with the deadlift. So in the program that I've got that people go through, there are 3 variations. There's the traditional deadlift, there is the sumo deadlift, and then there's a Romanian deadlift. Now, you also have the hex bar deadlift, but not all gyms have hex bars. So if someone's got that, we can talk about that while they're going through the program, but those are the 3 that I coach. All of them are very important to be able to do correctly. All of them have their different roles as far as biasing certain muscle groups, but adding variation to your movement, not just doing the traditional deadlift with the barbell, with the straight barbell, doing the sumo deadlift to change up your stance a little bit, doing the Romanian deadlift to change up the way that the load is transferred throughout the glutes and the low back. It's super important to change up those stimulus. Traditionally, I'll have folks either lead with the sumo deadlift or the traditional deadlift with their programs. That's usually their first exercise, that or a squatting motion. And then the Romanian deadlift is a supplemental motion, either on the same day as deadlifting day or on a day that they squat first instead. So kind of a recap. Your spine's not bad. Your spine can be strong and needs to be strong. Your spine is strong right now. It's likely a load tolerance issue if you're having issues with the deadlift. Utilize the deadlift as a way to build up that load tolerance. They use it in the research as a way to determine if exercise is going to be good or bad for someone's bulging disc or disc degeneration. They utilize the deadlift in that. In rucking, the deadlift is the number one exercise that the military uses to get military personnel ready for missions, ready to carry a heavy ruck. So if everybody else is using it in the research, why don't we use it in exercise to get ready for a heavy pack when we hunt? You want to directly load the spine. You don't want to shy away from it, even if it hurts. You've got to modify things, movement, depth of movement, the amount of load. You've got to modify things, but you still need to directly load the spine. You just have to find a way around it until you can get back to what you're doing before. Technique, shoulders above hips, hips above knees. That's super important. Your dosing, light is very good, heavy is very good. Using the weight belt is okay. You just have to add variety with all of that stuff. Lift heavy with the belt, lift heavy without the belt. Both are very, very important to do. And then add variety with your movements, the sumo deadlift, the traditional deadlift, and then the Romanian deadlift. All of these are very good for your back. All of these are very good for your spine. All of these are very good for your glutes and hamstrings. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend, and get after it. Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to your podcast app and consider leaving a review. If you think a friend or a family member may benefit from listening to this podcast, please consider sharing this episode with them. We appreciate your help in the growth of this podcast. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for even more content, and the weekly Hump Day Q&A, where you can get all of your human performance, rehab, women's health, and injury prevention questions answered. If you're interested in getting hooked up with even more content from Wilderness PT from the comfort of your own home, head over to wildernessphysicaltherapy.com and get signed up for the Spike Camp membership. This is where you'll have access to prior seminars and a workout that'll have you in shape each fall, designed by yours truly. Since you're there, check out the mid-month media newsletter that goes out 1 to 2 times a month, which includes a variety of topics with the most recent research on health and human performance. You can sign up by hovering over the free resources section and subscribe to any of the free guides, or simply sign up under the mid-month media newsletter tab.